Okay, this week's lecture is on compensation and benefits in employment. We're going to cover a couple of different concepts and theories. Okay, so how do companies devise a strong compensation plan? Why are you choosing to pay employees what you're choosing to pay them? Why did you choose the benefits that you chose to offer in your compensation plan? Are you doing it because your competitors are doing it? Are you doing it because it's expected in your industry? Does it really matter to you as a company? There are a lot of different business reasons why a company would offer the compensation plan that it does. And then a company has to decide how they want to compete. This is very much like from marketing class. How do you want your product to compete? If you think about the job opening as a product, there's the same thing because pricing moves who considers buying your product. So we really need to make sure that we understand what our compensation strategy is saying about us as a manufacturer of these products, these job openings. And then total reward statements is the whole picture that most of us never see for our jobs, but are very important from an HR point of view when we're factoring in our costs and overhead. Okay, first we have some legal requirements, as we always do. The legal consideration, the first one we have to be aware of is the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act, and this set minimum wage, overtime, maximum hours, child labor laws, and exempt non-exempt status. So this was probably the most important piece of legislation in compensation at that time. And honestly, to this day, we're still enforcing all of these. Some of them have shifted a little. Obviously, minimum wage has gone up quite a bit since where it was in 1938. There is a federal minimum wage level and state by state. They can choose to use the federal or they can go higher. They absolutely cannot go lower. Overtime pay has to be calculated once they have worked 40 hours per week or 80 hours per 2 weeks, depending on the industry. You can do it either way. Maximum hours is something for safety. Jobs like pilots and doctors and other fields, you're not allowed to work more than 60 hours a week, where if you're not sharp, somebody might die. So pilots aren't allowed to fly more than X number of hours in a day or Y number of hours in a week. And each of those industries set what a maximum hour is. For example, lawyers have no maximum hours for their industry. So if they wanted to work a 100-hour work week, legally speaking, there's no reason they can't. Child labor laws. We have certain allowances. If you're a child, you're allowed to work on your family farm, as an example, paid or unpaid. And then we go to a stacked system. When you're 12, you're allowed to get certain other kinds of jobs, like a babysitter or some more hired farm work. So now you're working for your neighbor's farm. And then when you get 14, 15, you're allowed to work, but you can't work past a certain time. You can't work more than a set number of hours. You're not allowed to work, I think, more than 3 hours on a school night if you're under 16, but it depends. Again, this is state specific. And then exempt, non-exempt. So most of us in this class are exempt employees. If we work 50 hours a week, we get paid the same amount as if we work 35 hours a week. Our expectation is 40 hours a week or 50 hours a week or whatever our job description or contract tells us our expected hours are. So as an HR person, how do we know if our employees are exempt or non-exempt? The first question is, does the employee earn more than $23,660 a year or $455 a week? If they make less than that, they are non-exempt. You're going to have to pay them overtime if they work more than their 40 hours a week. If the employee performs executive, administrative, professional, creative, computer professional, or outside sales, the employee is exempt. So as soon as your job description starts putting in things like administrative paperwork and you make more than $23,660 a year, you are normally going to be an exempt employee again, and you are going to be able to be eligible for overtime. If the answer to both of those is yes, you earn $24,000 a year and you have some administrative work, then there's some nuances run through the Department of Labor that you need to evaluate to see if your employee needs to be exempt or non-exempt. And there are certain tax and legal implications for having an employee be exempt or non-exempt. Sometimes companies will recognize the fact that it makes more sense to pay their employees hourly because on average they are working less than the expected 40 hours a week. So they'll save money by putting them on hourly. Other times they realize they're asking their employees to do 44 hours of work a week, so they make them exempt so they don't have to pay those 4 hours of overtime. And then there are other issues, unions, labor industry. If you remember from last week, motivation, one of the big 5 buckets was compensation. So we need to understand how money motivates our employees. The first one is equity. And I use the word equity here because some people say fair. Is our pay fair? And that sounds like a whiny child. That's not fair. So we use equity in HR to remove some of that stigma when people come and talk about their pay isn't fair. And there are a couple of ways to decide how to make your pay fair. Because if you make the CEO and the janitor get paid the same amount of money, you could say that was fair, but based on the job they're doing, I would argue that it's unfair. So equal does not mean fair. That is the first thing to make sure that we understand. Equal does not mean fair. We are not trying to make everyone get equal pay. We want to make sure that we have an equitable allowance for. All right, so here are the 4 ways we can do that. External equity. How do we compare to the same job with competitors? So if our competitors are all paying $40,000 a year and we're paying $25,000 a year, we have very low external equity. We are not being fair to our employees compared to the market. Now, what you don't want to do is look at an engineer in Wisconsin and an engineer in North Carolina. This is not a good comparison. You have to do same market. Cost of living can vary wildly. When I moved, it was a 16% jump in cost of living to come to Wisconsin because of our state income taxes and our property taxes and all those sorts of issues. So I expected a raise because of where I was coming, not because my job was changing. My job actually stayed the exact same. Okay, so that is external equity. How do we compare with competitors? Internal equity is how do we compare to other jobs within the company? So a second ago, I said we're not going to pay the CEO the same amount as the janitor. However, if we decide that we want to pay slightly better than average because we are hiring only the best employees, so we're going to pay a little more for them, then we need to be about 10% above average for the janitor and the CEO. We're not paying nurses 25% above market, doctors 25% above market, and then our administrative staff is actually 5% below market. We want to make sure that if we said as a company we want to be average. We don't want to be the highest payer. We don't want to be the lowest payer. We need to make sure that all departments are on that same level of payment. So we have internal equity that way. That's what that means with comparing jobs within the company. Individual equity is pay compared with peers. So you're on the same team with 5 other people doing the same job. How is your pay compared to theirs? This is the hard one, because if I've been there 3 years and you've been there 10 years, you should be making more than me. But what if I have a master's and you only have a bachelor's degree, so I started out with a higher rate of pay? What if you had a really good review and I had a marginal review? So you can see all these little nuances are starting to get into how are we comparing peers. The easiest way is to do pay bands. So you have some kind of static tool that we hired people within this pay band. They can get a raise within this pay band. They can get a bonus within this pay band. So you're making sure that the bands are equal, because you're not going to be able to look at Mary's paycheck and Billy's paycheck and see apples to apples. This is where that 70 cents on the dollar statistic comes from that you hear politicians talking about. All they do is look at all paychecks of men and all paychecks of women, and they don't take out any of the contributing factors. So we're not even talking gender here. We're just talking in the same role. And I've given you different examples of how your pay might be wildly different. If you have been at a job 10 years longer than somebody and you find out you're getting paid the exact same amount as them, you would probably be upset about that as well. Like, does my experience count for nothing? I'm going to leave. So we need to figure out a way internally that we can compare peers. And usually, like I said, it's those bands. And we need to make sure they're applied equally. We said that the hiring range was 60 to 65,000, and how well you negotiated depending on where you landed in that pay band. You could get a performance review and bonus at the end of the year of anywhere from 0 to 5%. How well you did is how well you land, and that sort of thing. Hopefully that one makes sense. And the last one is procedural equity. How fair is the process in deciding allocation of pay in the company? So for example, I was just saying the end of year bonus structure, 0 to 5%. And you have to fill out a form. Your manager has to fill out a form. Both of you agree on how well you did. Then it goes to HR, who can veto all of it and change your policy again. And then you might get 0 to 5%. However, the technical department down the hall is guaranteed at least a 10% bonus if they make their products through the R&D and legal process. And nobody needs to approve it. As soon as R&D and legal approve it, they get a 10% bonus. If your department finds out about that department, they get double. Nobody has to approve it. It gets put on their paycheck in 2 weeks, and our process takes 2 months. You start having pushback of, why does that department get such better processes? Why is it faster? Why is it cleaner? Why is it easier? Why did I get more money? And sometimes it makes sense. Sales teams usually get really high commissions, but they have lower base salaries, whereas administrative positions are expected to do a consistent level of work, and there's not really a metric that would require a goal. So we pay them a little more, and then they get performance or cost of living increases or that sort of thing. So their increases are smaller, but their base pay for their job is usually higher. So we have to decide which of those we want to use and how we want to use them. And honestly, you kind of have to consider all four, even if you rely heavily on one. We are fair because we're compared to other markets, and that's all we're concerned with. We don't really do all of these other things. We made sure it wasn't completely out of line, but all we ever do is compensation comparisons with our competitors. And honestly, HR is really open about that. MSOE just did one for all of our staff positions. We look to see what all the WACU schools are doing. That's the Wisconsin private colleges. And we look to see the athletic department, were we paying them the same as Concordia or Mount Mary or any of those other schools? And we made sure that our compensation was in line, and they will form a plan going forward to make sure that what they found is being used correctly and we're in the market position that we want to be in comparing to those other schools. Managing equity concerns. We have to maintain strong records on the competition, our internal pay structures, and confidentiality of pay policies. Most of our companies have a, if you talk about your pay, you'll get in trouble policy. And the reason they're doing that is if you find out that Billy's making $5,000 more than you and you've been there longer, HR now has to deal with it. They have to go through hoops. They have to explain, well, Billy had a master's degree and he bargained a lot better when he was hired. And they can't really do that because then they're breaking confidentiality with Billy. So you need to make sure that you understand why you're doing things and you have good record keeping. Because if you don't, and Billy's making more than me and I'm a female and I think it's because Billy's a male and you don't have documentation, you can lose a lawsuit on fair compensation. Because if you remember the Equal Pay Act of 1963, women have to be getting paid the same amount as men for the same role. So if I can't prove that, well, it's Billy negotiated better and you were eligible to get up to $65,000, but we offered you 60, you said, okay, thank you. Why would we mention that other people are getting paid 65? There is a new trend of open pay that you guys actually have a discussion on this week, where companies are tired of hiding everything and doing all this, don't talk about your pay, when everybody talks about their pay. And we have Glassdoor now, which shows you how much people in your company are making, and other tools like that, where they're just saying, here's what we pay our employees, and they're posting it. Sometimes straight up, Trina Moskalik makes $42 a year, and Sally Smith makes $37 a year, and you can see it, every single employee, and how much they made last year, posted on a sheet that they make public. And the reason is then they don't have to hide anything. So we'll have a discussion on that later this week. It is really an interesting trend because it can cause a lot of issues, but it can fix a lot of issues too. So it is a really interesting trend in my opinion. So what are the business considerations? Those were all employee considerations and motivational considerations. But why does the business care about how much we're paying people? Compensation is usually 60 to 70% of a company's overhead. So with that big of an expense, you need to make sure that you're doing the right thing. You want to pay employees on what tasks and duties benefit the company most for each position. So last week, you guys created job descriptions. And my guess is, I have not read them, it's Monday morning at 7:15, is that you guys have a lot of job duties. You have pretty much everything you could think of that role would need to cover, which is what you're supposed to do, basically. But how are we going to pay them? Which are the tasks that if they only did these tasks, that's all we need out of this role? So for example, as a professor, if all I did was teach and grade, would that be what the company wants to pay me on? Versus, I have to do meetings for the department and meetings for the college, and I have to go to conferences with students. They're not paying me for the conferences and the meetings. They're paying me to teach and grade. So those are the tasks that they care most about. And those are the ones that we're looking at to value, if you will. You want to be competitive amongst competitors for top talent. If you don't pay well, you're not going to get the top performers, the rock stars, if you will, the folks that you ask them to do 10, they give you 40. And they are amazing. They change the way we do business. They change the way customers think about us. If you don't have a strong compensation strategy, they won't even look at you. If I told you guys there was this fantastic job that you were really interested in, and you were being headhunted and recruited, and people are calling you all the time, come work for us, come work for us, and the job paid $5,000 less than you were currently getting paid, you probably wouldn't consider it for very long. There'd have to be a lot of other factors for you to look at taking less money or even equal pay. Most of us won't leave our company for equal pay. So how do we want to determine our compensation philosophy for the organization? I've kind of alluded to this in the last 2 slides. And for those of you that have taken an operations course already, these will look very similar to our business forces. You want to be different. So most of us, our top 2 or 3 competitors are 90% overlap of what we do. That's that last 10% that makes them a little different. So we want to do the same thing with our compensation. We can't just say, we'll give you $100,000 for every single job, because it's not realistic. What we can say is we really value family, and we show that by giving you flex time, 5 weeks of vacation. You can telecommute 3 days a week. You can bring your kid to work day if they're sick or they just want to see what you're doing. We have a daycare on site. We have breastfeeding rooms. These are all benefits that you can offer that are going to capture a particular type of employee, and they're going to make you very different. And if you have all of those benefits, your salary might not have to be as high, because if there's on-site daycare that I don't have to pay for, and daycare can be as expensive as $900 a month, that's a lot of money that I can save that, yeah, I'm not getting it in my salary, but I'm getting daycare. And if I have a young child or I'm starting a family or children, that might be a major consideration for me. Maybe the culture is your biggest factor. We are really looking for, like I just said, young parents. That benefit and compensation package I just mentioned would target younger workers. If you're in your 50s and you don't have children and you like going to work because it gets you out of the house, and none of those things are really selling points for you. However, if you have a high salary and low benefit package, you're going to get folks that are, again, probably younger, but not family focused yet. Most people in their early 20s as employees will mention the benefits that they want, but at the end of the day, if you offer them more money, they will take the money over the benefits. They're like, I want a 401k, but I'm willing to take the more money and I'll save on my own. So you can change your compensation strategy to get a new culture. We are going to give a normal salary, but huge bonuses for innovation because we're trying to become more innovative, that sort of thing. Market position. If you're the low-cost leader, you probably have low-cost employees because you're trying to keep your overhead low. You're not looking for rock stars. You're looking for people that can get the job done. Most of these jobs are going to be like, obviously Walmart is the one that you think of when you think low-price leader, and they actually save money, live better. Their philosophy is to hire the majority of their staff at a little below market level to save money. They understand that they could pay $10 an hour and maybe get a more experienced retail worker, but they don't need that. They need somebody that can put the SpaghettiOs on the shelf in the spot for SpaghettiOs. They're not looking for a rock star that can do it really fast. They're just looking for efficiency. However, once they get into management, they have a different position for their management and up-level employees, so they change that. But their market position for most of their employees is a little below average, and they don't have a problem filling those jobs, so they don't need to change it. And then the last one is usually the one that is used as a de facto. How much can we afford? Okay, we can afford $50,000 for this employee. So they want 52, we can't do it, we don't have the budget, we have $50,000. So then you figure out what mix of salary and benefits you're going to have that get you to $50,000. And maybe you negotiate that with the employee, and maybe you negotiate it ahead of time. So these are the 4 compensation business strategies that companies will use to decide their pay theory. So now we're going to get into the specifics. We have a theory. We're going to pay slightly better than market average. We're not going to be the top payers, but we do want to be slightly above average. So top 75th percentile is where we're looking, but no higher than 85th percentile of pay. We have to have an accurate job description. We have to know what that job does to figure out how much to pay them. The most common method is the Hay method. You pay per job description or per year, depending on your business model, and you rate all tasks with a point factor system. So you ask questions about their education, the complex, the skills, and then they get a score at the end. So a 300 level score would be that SpaghettiO stalker that I was talking about. You know, they're making barely more than minimum wage. We can't do minimum wage. They need to do a little bit better than that, but not a lot better. All the way up to, $850. That's our CEO. We understand that we're asking a lot out of them, and we figure it out. And then we make pay bands. So everyone from 300 to 400 is pay band 1. Everyone from 400 to 450 is pay band 2. And we make these bands. So you might have an engineer, an architect, and a professor in the same pay band. I have no idea what company that would be, but you might have them in the same pay band, even though they're doing wildly different jobs, just because that's their worth to the organization. And we decide where to place the positions based on their score. So then we have the scores, and we can see, you can see breaks. Like, we don't have anybody that scored 500 to 530. Like, they're either below that or above that. There's nobody in that bracket. So you set your bands, and you'll have, 6 to 26 pay bands, and then you look and you set dollar amounts on those pay bands. And you say, okay, these jobs are going to make anywhere from $12,000 a year to $25,000 a year. And usually we're doing this per hour. In case they are exempt, non-exempt, we want to make sure we have it per hour. And then we also put it per year. So you'll see that both ways. And you set those bands. And some of the bands are really narrow. Like everyone in this pay band is getting paid $20,000 to $22,000. It's a really narrow entry level band. All the way up to your C-suite, which, your 800 to 850 scores, this is going to be anywhere from $300,000 to $3 million. So it's a huge band because we're going to talk about executive compensation next week. It varies wildly. So we have to have a bigger band because what a CEO makes compared to what a COO makes is usually an exponential pay jump. So we set those bands, and then we set the dollar amounts for the bands. Sometimes you just have created a new job and you have no idea what to pay them. So you'll send off as a one-off, how much is this, score this job for us. And they'll also give you for your job, you should be paying them roughly $74,000 to $84,000. So that way, if you have somebody that really is a one-stop shop for your company, they don't have to figure out how much to pay somebody and guess and do well, what are you expecting? How much would you like to earn? They know what they're paying, and they can ask that question from a make sure we're aligned point, not I have no idea how much I'm going to pay for this job point. So that's how we actually get to the technical of figuring out how much to pay someone. If we are not that technical and not that savvy, we usually just do a Google search and see how much jobs like that are getting paid. Okay, so our benefits. Your mandatory benefits that I have to give you as an employee in the United States is unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, Social Security, and Medicare. However, this is for W-2 employees. If you are an independent contractor and you get an I-9, I don't even have to take this out. I just give you your money, and you're supposed to set that aside because you're going to have to pay that in taxes at the end of the year. So most of us are W-2 employees, and we're not independent contractors. But if any of you, those fingernail tape things or Tupperware or the weird smelly oils and that sort of thing, those are all independent contractor jobs, and they're not taking any of that money out for you. So we are only talking about W-2'd employees for this part. And most of us don't even think of these as benefits. If I was like, well, hey, I'm going to give you these 4 benefits, you would kind of squint and be like, I don't really want those. It doesn't matter if you want them. We don't really want them either, but we have to pay for them. And when I post this PowerPoint, the links on the bottom are there for you to find the amount, because for your compensation assignment, you have to put together a total rewards package. And if you don't have your mandatory benefits, you will not get higher than a developing score. So make sure that you look at those links and factor in the correct mandatory benefits for your total rewards compensation package. So the optional benefits, these are the ones that we are actually thinking of when we say benefits. Medical insurance. Medical insurance is still optional. And the reason it is not mandatory is because if you're a church, you don't have to pay it. If you're a religious organization that won your lawsuit, you don't have to pay it. If you have less than 50 employees, you don't have to pay it. If you have a family-run business, even if you have more than 50 employees, you don't have to pay it. And then other companies filed for extensions, waivers, grants, exclusions. So because of all of these caveats, loopholes, and nuances, medical insurance is still optional. The other ones here are some of them we think of. When I ask you, like, well, what benefits do you want from a job? Maybe you want a retirement account. Maybe you want vacation. You want paid sick time. You want to know that you don't have to use your vacation days for Christmas and Thanksgiving, that you get, paid holidays. Maybe you want maternity and paternity leave. Maybe you want to know, will they count maternity and paternity leave if you adopt? So all of us will have different ideas on what matters the most to us. This tuition assistance program on the second column probably matters a lot to most of you as you're in grad school. Is your company paying for this? Part of it, any of it? So we look at these things, and as a business, we decide which to offer. And I may have mentioned in class before, my previous job was an HR consultant, and I specifically worked with employee development. So their tuition assistance program and their scholarship programs were the ones that I focused on. And when I would ask companies, senior leaders, why do you offer a tuition assistance program? I don't know, because it's expected and our competitors do it. Horrible business case. You should never offer a benefit because our competitors do it. If it doesn't make sense to your company, don't offer it. If you do not reward people for getting an advanced degree, do not offer it. However, well, we really like our managers to have a management degree. Okay, well, you hire engineers and then you want your manager to have management degrees? Right. Okay, so do you pay for them to go back to school? Yes. That is a good program. Now, do you have caveats on your tuition assistance program? We're only going to pay $52.50 a year. $5,250 a year is all they're legally allowed to give you until they have to start taxing you as income. So that's a cap that a lot of companies put in place. Or they'll put in, we'll pay for the whole thing, but you have to sign this contract that if you leave within the next 2 years, you have to pay us back. And that way they don't train you and then you leave and go somewhere else. We will give you 3 weeks of vacation time, but at the end of the year, they disappear. If you don't use them, you lose them. Some companies will let you roll them over. My mom, and I am not exaggerating, has 197 days of sick time accumulated. So when she's ready to retire, she's just going to retire like 6 months early and then use her sick time for the last 6 months and basically get paid all of that sick time and have 6 months off because they let you accumulate them with no cap. She was a very healthy woman for most of her life. She has a boatload of sick time. My role does not allow paid sick time. It's not a thing for me. I'm on salary. I do not get paid sick time. If I am sick and have to miss a class, I can cancel it. I can have a coworker cover it, or I can do what I'm doing right now for you guys and record the lecture and have them work on it asynchronously. But to get a paid day off is not something that we have in our contract. I also do not get any paid vacation days. When you guys are in class, I'm in class. When you're on break, I'm on break. And I can choose to work over the summer or not. So technically I do get a vacation, but it's not necessarily like you think of where you have to request permission and put in a vacation allowance and get it approved, make sure your work is covered. It's assumed that we'll all be off in August, unless we're teaching in third term. So it's a different set of benefits. In different fields, we also expect different things and in different levels of the company. So once you get higher up into the company, once you start getting into director, senior director, executive positions, you start asking about stock options. You start asking about concierge services. You start asking about country club memberships being paid and different options that as an entry-level employee, it would never occur to you to ask, can I get stock options vested? It's not something that we normally offer to an entry-level position. So we decide which benefits we want to offer and then put a dollar amount on them. So each vacation day is costing us 8 or 10 hours of your paycheck. So if I'm giving you 2 weeks of vacation, that is costing 2 weeks of your salary because that work does not just go away. That's one of the things that folks just say, well, I'll just give them an extra week of vacation and that way I don't have to raise the salary. You do raise your overhead when you give vacation days because you're not getting the output, but you're still putting the money out there. And depending on the role, you might have to hire a temp in to cover them or bring in another worker. For example, if you work at Harley and you're the person that screws the bolts into the top of the engine block and you take 2 weeks off, they're not just going to send those engines out without the bolts. They're going to have somebody else come in there and do it, but they were paying you as well. So when you do your total rewards, you need to make sure to give all of these a dollar amount. Oh, this is another sheet that's actually in one of your attachments that breaks them into the area and mental bucket of why you're offering these rewards. So we have our compensation categories. So when you guys are figuring out your pay for your job description, how much of it is salary, how much of it is differential pay, how much of it is a bonus program, is there profit sharing, that sort of thing. You're figuring out how you're paying them. And then we go through our benefits. We have to have the legally required ones, but then we're all about performance and recognition benefits. We want to make sure that they know that we are all about performance and recognition. So you might choose from that category. And I know this is a little blurry, but like I said, you have it as a PDF in your attachments, and it's very clear there. I'm going to talk about a couple other things, and then I'm going to talk about how to put a dollar amount on some of these benefits. I want to get a little more clarity on health insurance. Honestly, is the most confusing and complicated benefit that companies offer because most of it is done by your HR team. Life insurance, you offer a couple of different choices for your team, and then all of the paperwork is handled by the life insurance company. HR doesn't handle any of that usually. But health insurance, we have to cover quite a bit of it. So COBRA insurance is if you lose your job in March, it will pay for you're allowed to keep your insurance for 6 months after you lose your job, and that way you don't lose coverage. Now that we have this last one, Obamacare, you don't have an issue with this, but before, if you had a gap in coverage, so you lose your job in March, and then I hire you in November, and I start you on insurance again, and you go to the doctor for asthma. Now it's a pre-existing condition, and I'm charging you a boatload of money on my new insurance. COBRA gave you the window where you rolled from insurance to insurance, so you didn't have a pre-existing condition that cost you more money. And this used to be a huge deal to be able to get COBRA insurance if you lost your job, because a pre-existing condition goes from I get a cold, I go to the doctor, I have a $20 copay. I have an asthma flare-up and I go to the doctor, I have a $100 copay because it was a pre-existing condition visit. So it was a big deal. It's not as important anymore unless you have ongoing medical needs and you don't want to go into the Obamacare system because the enrollment process is ridiculously long and you know it's just a short-term gap. There is some talk that COBRA will go away now that we have Obamacare, but as of right now, it's still offered. Then we have HIPAA, which a good chunk of you are familiar with as patients or healthcare employees. It protects the employee's right to transfer insurance with pre-existing conditions and protects patient privacy. So this is what I was talking about before. If you went from company A to company B, so you interviewed at company B, they offer you a job, yay, I love it. You give notice, you move over to the new job. They couldn't ask your pre-existing conditions because you had continued coverage. And because we had HIPAA privacy, they just had to take you as you were, no matter what kind of high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, they had to take you and they couldn't ask. And what questions they could ask, they couldn't share. So still we have HIPAA. We can't share information, but your company might ask you about your health conditions on a voluntary basis to get an idea for quotes from their providers. So for example, MSOE every December does a Know Your Numbers campaign for the following year. And if you participate in this campaign, you get better copays and deductibles. So if you go and get, and I know I'm not going to remember them all, but if you get your blood pressure, your glucose, your pulse, and I don't know, there were like 5 other things that you got done, your height, weight, BMI, that sort of thing. you turned the form in to MSOE and you kept a copy so you could know your numbers. That's the whole point of the campaign, so you can become healthier. MSOE uses that to negotiate us better terms. Look, we have a healthy workforce. We have very few instances of obesity, diabetes, heart disease. They can see that because they're doing this campaign. I, as an employee, benefit because my copay went from 80/20 to 95/5. So for those of you that don't understand those numbers, 80% paid by insurance, 20% paid by me as an employee, to 95% paid by the insurance company, only 5% paid by me. So for a 15% reduction in my copays, I'll go and let them draw some blood from me and, do this little test absolutely every time. So that was one of their ideas. They cannot share that information on well, Trina got this score and this person got that score. They aggregate it all. So that's where I was going with that. I got very convoluted there, but you can see some things they share and they aggregate. They just have to protect me as an employee. I got very convoluted. Sorry about that. Back on track. The last one is Obamacare. We got this one a couple years ago, and it was pushed through with nobody understanding it. They all admit it now. What they thought they wrote and what they have are two completely different things. And because it was pushed through so fast with so little understanding, there were contradictory parts. It was very, very clear for me as a person signing up for insurance. On the other side, there's penalties for companies that don't offer insurance. That part was a hot mess. What they said wasn't legally compliant and it contradicted itself. It wasn't enforceable. And it really, how do you want us to do this? Explain this to us as a company. We're offering health insurance, so we're good. No, you have to give us documentation. What kind of documentation? We don't know. So it got pushed back for 3 years and it's been in effect since January 1st. So you probably got to form a 1065-C with your W-2 this year that said you had proof of health insurance for your taxes if you use your company's health insurance. But it was so ill-defined that companies were not sure if their plans were compliant because you couldn't have catastrophe-only insurance anymore, which is what I had for a decade personally. I was a very healthy person. I just wanted to know that if I got a car accident or I got cancer, that it wouldn't bankrupt me. So everything else, I could pay the $130 urgent care visit if I got an earache or something. But everything else, catastrophe-wise, huge, I had insurance for. That's no longer allowed through companies through the Obamacare Act. So the plans for employers changed a lot. It made deductibles jump 11 and 12% in 2015 and 2016 for employer plans. And most of it was just to bring it up to the level that Obamacare made as compliant, especially when you added in you must give 100% wellness visit once a year. You must allow for this test. You must pay for birth control. You must pay with all the must pays. That's why it went up so much. And now that it's required, insurance can charge more. If you make something mandatory where I have to buy it whether I want it or not, the company selling it can charge more. Period. End of story. That's basic economics. That's in effect. You can see in the notes of the presentation a couple more of the finer points. Most of it has been, it's clear now. It's in effect. Companies are compliant. People are compliant. It is, on the individual level, evidently the theory is sound, the practice is weak. And it is really having a lot of issues from the individual level of actually covering people the way they thought they were covered and actually getting people signed up. It can take as much as 6 months for you to get your paperwork done to get insurance, which is crazy because in a company, you can fill out the paperwork and be covered by insurance literally 25 minutes later. So there's still a lot of issues, and the IRS honestly still doesn't know how to assess those fees. This year they put it on there, and they're still using your honor system. Did you have insurance? Yes, on TurboTax, and they don't ask for proof of it. So we're still using honor code, and for companies, they have no way to support and enforce companies that aren't offering insurance. So it's kind of, it's a mess. I'm sure they'll figure it out, or they'll repeal it and reissue it or something, but it was a large law that wasn't well understood. Everybody that was in HR kept saying, can we slow down? Can you clarify? It was never clarified. So we have what we have. So there are a couple different types of health insurance, and these are, again, employer health insurances, not if you go and get Obamacare insurance. There are other plans. These are the kinds that your company can offer. A traditional health insurance you hardly ever see. It was, you could go to any doctor you wanted, and they would pay for it. It would cover your doctor, it would cover your hospital bill. It would not cover quite a few tests. It would cover x-rays, but not blood work. And it wasn't, the idea being insurance shouldn't pay for things that you know and expect and are routine. Insurance is a gamble. You are betting that you will stay healthy, and no, insurance is betting that you will stay healthy, and you are betting that you are going to get sick. That's why you buy health insurance. You are betting that you will get sick and need it. And the health insurance company is betting that you will stay healthy and not need it. So we just manipulate how we jump through these hoops. An HMO came out in the 90s, and basically you have to choose one of these preferred doctors. It covers most checks, it covers most doctors and hospital bills if you're in HMO. You go on vacation, you get hurt, you're out of network, and there's a solid chance nothing is covered. Sometimes HMOs will allow for emergencies, sometimes they won't. They literally, you're out of network. Sorry, we have network doctors over there, but you didn't go to one of them. And you're trying to explain, well, I was in an ambulance and unconscious. I didn't really have a choice of where I want. They don't care. They're not going to pay it. A PPO is a new one. It's preferred provider organizations. These are usually a group of doctors that have joined together, and you can use them or outside doctors. But if you use a PPO doctor, your copay is $20. If you use a non-PPO doctor, it's $50 because we don't know them. They might be shady. So you can use them, but we're going to charge you usually double. And they do the partial outside network and doctors. So if you have a plan where before you go to the doctor, you are checking to see if they're covered, then you probably have an HMO or a PPO. Most insurance companies these days cover systems, not doctors. So you can go to any Aurora Medical doctor because we are working with Aurora. You can go to any Pro Health, any Wheaton Franciscan, and they don't really go through doctor by doctor, line by line anymore, just because doctors will rotate and they'll have privileges at 2 or 3 different hospitals. When you get into specialists, they do start going back to doctors. But luckily, in this day and age of the fancy internet that we have, they'll have an app or a website where you can type in your doctor's name and it'll pop up and tell you, yes, you can go there, but you need a referral from your primary care doctor. Okay, great. The last one is self-insured. So this is actually, some small companies will do this. The company has a pool of money and they act as the insurance company. So instead of you getting bills from Blue Cross Blue Shield or whatever other company there is, you get bills from your employer. They usually have reinsurance, so they're acting as the insurance, and then they buy a policy for reinsurance in case of a catastrophic claim. So you have one $5 million cancer employee, and it can devastate self-insured. If you have, 50 urgent care visits, it's normal. You've got all the premiums going in there. And self-insured used to be very popular, and now with all the laws and regulations and what's allowed and what's not allowed with Health insurance companies are moving away from this. It's just not worth it. And especially with how expensive healthcare has become, it's just too much of a gamble. I mean, there are certain drugs that cost $500 a pill and they have to take it 3 times a day. So are you going to just not pay for that and then have to look at your employee that you probably have a personal relationship with and say, we're not covering that medicine that may save your life? It's a bit too personal. So those are the 4 kinds of health insurance that companies will offer. They then get quotes from brokers or insurance companies. So we say we have 650 employees. We live in Wisconsin only. We are looking for a PPO. And last year we had $5 million in claims. 30% of our population is this age, 20% is that age. We had this many cases of this disease, that disease. Give us a quote. And they just get a bunch of quotes in and see which one is the best for their employees. And we as employees every year expect to have a small rate hike, and it's usually okay. The year that it jumped 12% was horrible. This year, actually, a lot of employers saw it go down just a little bit because they had overcorrected for Obamacare in 2015. So they got to go back down just a little bit for 2016. So they get quotes based on the data that's asked for by each insurance company. So how does insurance cost break down? Most of us think of the $300 a month that we pay for insurance as our insurance costs. But in reality, your employer is paying a lot more. So your full price for insurance, if you're single, you think is $154. In reality, it's something like $620 is your per month insurance price. So when you do total rewards, it's usually a 2-to-1 ratio, sometimes 3-to-1 ratio on how much you pay versus how much the employer pays. And this is really the employer deciding how much of a burden they can put on their employees. So if I tell you that your insurance is $600 a paycheck, most of us will say that's too expensive and I can't do that. Every now and again, you'll have somebody say, that's really cheap because I have a family of 9 and that works out really well for me. So the company will decide how much they can pay versus how much they want you to be responsible for. And like I said, it's usually somewhere between a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 ratio. And as you can see, it's once you start getting up into family and children, it starts getting more expensive. But most employers have a family plan where it's both parents and up to so many children, or all children, or all family members in residence. They'll tell you who they're considering family for your plan. Can I add on my same-sex partner? Maybe. Can I add on my mother who lives with me and is 85, has Alzheimer's? Maybe. Can I add in my foster child? Maybe. So there's, depending on the company and their plan and their insurer, you can add or take out a couple different ways. So the other thing with health insurance is there's normally an open enrollment time. So you can change your insurance in October for 3 weeks. If you got married, or maybe you just want to change your plan. I bought the Cadillac insurance, the really expensive gold level, nothing out of pocket. I didn't need it at all. So I'm going to downgrade and save myself some money and go that way. Other times, you want to, I need to add in dental, like my kid needs braces. I need dental insurance this year. And then there's change of life. So that's when if somebody's born, if somebody dies, if you get married, divorced, you can add them during the year. Or if you're hired, you can start insurance in an off time. So these are the costs to the company for your health insurance. Okay, so you can see this is a total compensation chart. So my previous employer gave us one of these every year as part of our end of year closing out paperwork. We got one of these in the mail, and it was honestly my favorite document of the year. There was a total compensation number I was shooting for that I really wanted to break. So obviously, if I ask you how much do you make, most of you would tell me your salary. Well, if you would tell me anything at all, you would tell me your salary. But then there's also how much did you get in paid leave bonuses, insurance, pensions, 401k, legally required benefits. And you want to add all of those up and create a total compensation chart. This is going to be part of your compensation assignment. You need to make sure you have your legally required benefits. They're usually anywhere from 7 to 12%, depending on the industry and position type that you chose. And state. I think I require you to do it in Wisconsin. I'll verify before your assignment next week. But you want to put together this chart because if you think the company only values you for $34,000, you're not factoring in the other $10,000 with this example that the company actually thinks your position is worth. Your position is worth $44,000 to the company. So this one is actually pretty tight. It's only a $10,000 difference. If you think benefits are usually 30% in addition to your salary, this can be a huge gap the more obviously your pay goes up. So you need to make sure that you understand the total compensation that you are asking for in the job description that you created for our next week's assignment. The other thing that you want to factor in is supply and demand. So you know how much you came up with that pay band, you did your benefits package, so you know roughly what you want to do. You have to figure in supply and demand for candidates in your market, okay? How many open positions are competing for the talent? So if you are posting an engineer job that is, fresh out of college engineering job, if you look on Milwaukee Jobs or Monster or Indeed or any of those, are there 20 other postings right now for that same position? Is there one? Who are you competing with? How many of them are there? You need to know this so you know who else you're competing against. The second one is how many applicants meet the requirement. So again, you normally could see a resume bank in those websites, the Monsters, that sort of thing. You can also look at different Department of Labor websites and type in how many engineers are in Milwaukee, and it will give you that data. So if you, for example, are trying to hire a welder in Wisconsin, you are probably paying sign-on bonuses. You are paying them on average right now 40% above market because there aren't any welders here that are looking for work. And there are, last time I looked, like 130 welding positions open in southeastern Wisconsin and northern Illinois. So if I'm a welder, I can pick and choose who's giving me the biggest bonus, who's going to let me have flex time, who's going to let me, and I can start being really choosy. However, in North Carolina, they have an abundance of welders. There are no jobs because the jobs are leaving the state, and they're really having a hard time down there even finding a job. So they're paying less in North Carolina because they don't need somebody, and they're okay if it takes a lot longer for them to fill that role. So you need to factor in, do we need to pay more to be more competitive? Can we pay less because there are so many people in the market? We don't have to spend top dollar to get a good candidate. For example, when the recession happened, companies were looking at their pay bands and like, we'll pay $60,000 to $65,000 normally. But right now, we're going to mentally say we're not going to offer more than $62,000 because there's so much talent out there. We can find a good person for under $62,000 and save ourselves $3,000 a year. For your assignment, you do have to look at supply and demand in Milwaukee. I know not everyone lives in Milwaukee, but that's the market that I want you to use because that's the market I'm familiar with. So my apologies, compliance, everyone's using the market of Milwaukee. I want you to look at, for the job you chose in your job description assignment in week 4, what is the supply and the demand for that role? Make sure you give me sources. So if you used the Department of Labor, or you used Wikipedia, or you used, I guessed that there's a lot of people, I wouldn't guess, but how are you going to adjust? And maybe it seems like the market's in equilibrium, so the data that you did on the foreground of how much you're going to pay your employer or your candidate based on your searches of other job postings, you think is pretty accurate because the market seems to be in equilibrium. That's okay too. You just need to apply and support all of that. So the whole picture, what gets the most weight? What are you offering as a company? Why are you offering it? As an employee, which of the benefits are non-negotiable? I mean, we all have that one that we're like, I cannot take a job that doesn't offer me fill in the blank. So we really want to make sure that we have a nice balance of benefits and salary. And that balance is usually 60-40 or 70-30, somewhere in there for the split. Your salary should be 60 to 70% of your total compensation package. All right, I hope that helps. I hope it makes sense. Reach out if you have questions.